with phosphorus. The particles unleashed by the radium made the phosphorus glow in the dark. As news of this rare exotic substance spread, it became a sensation. In New York, dancers put on radium-coated outfits to perform in darkened casinos. People wondered if radium would become a mainstay of civilization. Are we about to realize the chimerical dream of the alchemists? Lamps giving light perpetually without the consumption of oil? One chemist mused. Radium also seemed to have a vitalizing power. Gardeners sprinkled it on their flowers, convinced it could make them grow bigger. Some people drank liquid sunshine to cure all manner of ills, including even cancer. It was cancer that would eventually claim Marie Curie's life in 1934, probably because of the radium and other radioactive elements she worked with on a daily basis. Now that we understand the deadly risk posed by radioactivity, it's hard to imagine how anyone could think that radium could have vitalizing powers. But in the early 1900s, scientists knew surprisingly little about the nature of life. The best they could say was that its essence lurked in the jelly-like substance in cells, a material they called protoplasm. It somehow organized cells into living things and was passed down from one generation to the next. Beyond that, little was certain, and all manner of ideas were viable. To Burke, life and radioactivity displayed a profound similarity. Like a caterpillar becoming a moth, a radium atom could undergo a transformation that seemed to come from within. It changes its substance. In a limited sense, it lives, and yet it is ever the same, Burke declared in a 1903 magazine article. The distinction, apparently insuperable, that the biologist holds to exist between living and so-called dead matter should thus pass away as a false distinction. All matter is alive. That is my thesis. Burke said all this as a scientist, not a mystic. We must be careful lest our imagination should carry us away and lead us into regions of pure fancy, to a height beyond the support of experimental facts, he warned. To prove his thesis, Burke designed an experiment. He would use radium to create life from lifeless matter. To carry out this act of creation, Burke prepared some bouillon, cooking chunks of beef in water and sprinkling in salt and gelatin. Once the ingredients had turned to a broth, he poured some into a test tube and put it over a flame. The heat destroyed any cow cells or microbes that might be lurking in the liquid. All that was left was a sterile bouillon made up of loose, lifeless molecules. Burke put a pinch of radium salt in a tiny sealed vial, which was suspended over the broth. A platinum wire wrapped around the vial and snaked out a side port. To launch the experiment, Burke pulled the free end of the wire until the vial cracked. The radium tumbled into the broth below. After he let the radioactive broth stew overnight, Burke saw that it had changed. A cloudy layer had formed on its surface. Burke drew off a little to see if it was made of contaminating bacteria. He spread it over a petri dish loaded with food for microbes. If the cloudy layer had any bacteria in it, they would feast until they grew into visible colonies. But no colonies formed. Burke concluded the layer must have been formed by something else. Taking another sample of the cloudy layer, he spread it on a glass slide and put it under a microscope. Now he could see that it contained a scattering of specks far smaller than bacteria. A few hours later, when he checked again, the specks had vanished. But the next day they returned, and Burke began drawing them, documenting how they grew in size and changed in shape. Over the course of the next few days, they turned into spheres, with inner cores and outer rinds. They stretched into dumbbells. They bulged and pinched into miniature flowers. They divided, and then, after 2 weeks, they fell apart. Some might say they died. As Burke sketched these changing shapes, he could tell they were not bacteria. It wasn't just that they were too small. When Burke put some of them in water, they dissolved away, a fate that bacteria did not suffer. Yet Burke was convinced these radium-laced blobs were not crystals or any other familiar forms of lifeless matter. They are entitled to be classed among living things, Burke concluded. He had created artificial life, as he called it, creatures that existed at the far edges of life's territory. And to these things he gave a name that commemorated the element that gave birth to them: radio.